The contractions hit like lightning bolts, each one stealing Jasmine's breath and doubling her over in the passenger seat. She gripped the door handle of their beat-up Honda, her knuckles ashy from the strain, watching the digital clock tick past 2:47 a.m. "Deshaun, please," she gasped between waves of pain. "The contractions are 3 minutes apart. We need to get to the hospital now." Her husband's dark eyes stayed fixed on the empty road ahead, his jaw clenched tight. The streetlights cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look like a stranger. "You always exaggerating everything, Jess, acting all dramatic." Another contraction ripped through her, this one so intense she couldn't hold back a scream. Her water had broken 20 minutes ago, soaking through her nightgown and onto the car seat. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. "Deshaun." She reached for his arm, but he jerked away from her touch. "Something's wrong. This baby's coming fast and I can feel." "Feel what?" His voice was cold, empty of the love she'd once known. "You've been nothing but problems since you got pregnant. Complaining, whining, acting like you special." Jasmine's heart cracked along with her body. For 9 months, she'd watched the man she married slowly disappear, replaced by someone cruel and distant. The tender touches had turned to shoves. The sweet words had become insults. But she never imagined he could be this heartless when she needed him most. They'd been driving for 15 minutes, but instead of heading toward Mercy General Hospital, Deshaun had taken back roads that led nowhere. The realization hit her harder than any contraction. "Where are we going?" Fear crept into her voice. "The hospital's the other way." Deshaun pulled over on a deserted stretch of highway, gravel crunching under the tires. No cars. No lights. Just darkness stretching in every direction. He put the car in park and turned to face her, his expression colder than winter. "Get out." "What?" Jasmine's voice cracked. Another contraction was building and she could barely think through the pain. "I said get out. I'm done with this. Done with you. Done with that baby." He reached across her and opened the passenger door. "You want to have a baby so bad? Do it yourself." "Deshaun, no. Please." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process what was happening. "I'm in labor. I could die out here. The baby. Should have thought about that before you trapped me." His voice was ice. "I never wanted kids. Never wanted to be tied down to someone like you. Someone like you." The words hit like a physical blow. All the love she'd poured into their 3-year marriage, all the dreams they'd shared, crumbled in that moment. Another contraction doubled her over and she felt the baby dropping lower. This was happening fast, too fast. She needed medical help, needed someone who loved her, needed anything but this nightmare. "Get out, Jasmine." Deshaun's tone held no room for argument. "Now." "The baby's coming," she whispered, clutching her belly. "Right now. I can feel the head." "Then you better figure it out quick." He got out of the car and walked around to her side. "I got things to do tonight and they don't include playing daddy." When she didn't move fast enough, he grabbed her arm and pulled her from the seat. The movement sent a shock of agony through her body, and she collapsed to her knees on the rough asphalt. "Deshaun, please don't do this." She looked up at him through her tears, this man she'd loved with everything in her. "I'm your wife. This is your baby." "Not anymore." He got back in the car and rolled down the window. "You always said you were strong and independent. Prove it. Die out here for all I care." The taillights disappeared into the darkness, leaving Jasmine alone on the empty road. Another contraction hit, stronger than before, and she knew with terrifying certainty that her baby was coming whether she was ready or not. The night air was cold against her skin, and every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic on a faraway highway, her own labored breathing. She fumbled for her phone, but the screen showed no signal bars. "Help me," she whispered to the empty sky. "Please, somebody help me." But there was no one to hear her except the stars, and they offered no comfort as another wave of pain crashed over her, bringing her baby closer to a world that had already shown its cruelty. Mrs. Rosa Williams had been driving this same route home from her late shift at the textile factory for 15 years. At 65, she could navigate these back roads with her eyes closed, knew every pothole and curve by heart. But tonight, something made her slow down as she rounded the bend near Miller's Creek. A bundle of something white caught in her headlights. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. A woman's cry of pain, raw and desperate, cutting through the quiet night. Rosa pulled over immediately, her hands shaking as she grabbed the flashlight from her glove compartment. In 40 years of nursing before her retirement, she'd heard that sound countless times. Labor. and something was very wrong. The beam of her flashlight found Jasmine crouched beside the road, her nightgown torn and bloody, her face twisted in agony. "Sweet Jesus," Rosa whispered, running toward her. "Baby, what happened? Where's your husband? Your car?" Jasmine looked up with wild, frightened eyes. "He left me," she gasped between contractions. "He drove off and left me here to die." Rosa's heart clenched, but her nursing training kicked in immediately. She knelt beside Jasmine, assessing the situation with practiced eyes. The woman was in active labor, fully dilated from what she could see, and this baby was coming fast. "How far apart are your contractions, honey?" "I don't know," Jasmine sobbed. "They're constant now. I can feel the baby's head. Oh God, it's coming." Okay. Listen to me." Rosa's voice was calm and sure, the same tone she'd used to guide hundreds of women through this moment. "My name is Rosa Williams. I used to be a labor and delivery nurse for 40 years. You're gonna be just fine, you hear me? I can't do this." Jasmine's voice broke. "Not like this. Not alone. You're not alone, baby." Rosa was already moving, pulling blankets from her car, dialing 911 on her phone. "I'm here with you and I'm not going anywhere." The 911 operator's voice crackled through the speaker. 911, what's your emergency? This is Rosa Williams. I'm on Highway 49 about 2 miles past Miller's Creek. I've got a woman in active labor on the side of the road. The baby's crowning and we need an ambulance immediately. Ma'am, we're dispatching units to your location now. Can you see the baby's head? Rosa looked down as Jasmine bore down with another contraction. Yes, the head is crowning. This baby's coming whether we're ready or not. Stay on the line. Help is about 15 minutes out. 15 minutes? Rosa knew this baby wouldn't wait that long. Jasmine, honey, what's your name? Your full name? Jasmine Turner, she panted. Is my baby going to be okay? Your baby's going to be perfect. Rosa spread blankets on the ground and helped position Jasmine. But I need you to listen to me carefully. When the next contraction comes, I want you to push but not too hard. Let your body do the work. The next contraction built quickly, and Jasmine screamed as she pushed. The baby's head emerged fully, face down, just as Rosa remembered from countless deliveries. Beautiful, honey. The head's out. Now I need to check for the cord. Rosa's experienced fingers found what she feared, the umbilical cord wrapped around the baby's neck. Not uncommon but dangerous without proper tools. What's wrong? Jasmine saw the concern in Rosa's face. The cord's around the baby's neck, but don't panic. I've seen this 100 times. Rosa's hands moved with practiced skill, gently working to loosen the cord. With the next contraction, I need a big push to get the shoulders out. Jasmine nodded, tears streaming down her face. Is my baby going to live? Your baby's going to be just fine, Rosa said firmly. And so are you. Now push, honey. Push like your life depends on it. With a primal cry that seemed to come from the depths of her soul, Jasmine pushed with everything she had left. The baby's shoulders emerged, then the rest of the tiny body slipped out in a rush of fluid and blood. For a terrifying moment, the baby was silent. Rosa quickly cleared the airway and rubbed the infant's back vigorously. Come on, baby, she whispered. Come on. Then, like the most beautiful music in the world, the baby let out a strong, healthy cry. It's a girl? Rosa announced, wrapping the infant in her own jacket. Jasmine, you did it. You have a beautiful daughter. Jasmine sobbed as Rosa placed the baby on her chest. The tiny girl was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a cry that announced her arrival to the world with no uncertainty. Hi, baby, Jasmine whispered, stroking the infant's dark hair. Mama's here. Mama's here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you. In the distance, sirens wailed as the ambulance approached. But in that moment, on the side of a dark road where she'd been left to die, Jasmine felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The emergency room at Mercy General buzzed with controlled chaos as the ambulance doors burst open. Dr. Amara Thompson looked up from her charts as the paramedics wheeled in a young black woman clutching a newborn baby, both covered in blankets. What do we have? Dr. Thompson asked, falling into step beside the gurney. 28-year-old female, delivered on the roadside about 20 minutes ago, the paramedic reported. Baby appears healthy, mom lost some blood but vitals are stable. Rosa Williams assisted with the delivery, she's the retired nurse who found them. Dr. Thompson's eyes met Rosa's as the older woman walked alongside the stretcher, still wearing her factory uniform stained with blood and dirt. Rosa? Rosa Williams from L&D? Dr. Thompson had been a resident when Rosa was head nurse in the maternity ward. "That's me, baby." Rosa managed a tired smile. "Found this angel and her baby on Highway 49. Her husband left her there to die." The words hung in the air like a curse. Dr. Thompson's expression hardened as she looked at Jasmine, who was staring at her baby with fierce protectiveness. "Room 3, Dr. Thompson ordered. And call Dr. Martinez from Pediatrics. I want this baby checked thoroughly." As they moved Jasmine to the examination room, Nurse Patricia Johnson appeared with clean blankets and warm towels. Pat had been working labor and delivery for 12 years and she'd seen everything, but something about this case made her heart ache. "Hey Mama," Pat said gently, helping Jasmine sit up on the bed. "I'm Pat and I'm going to take good care of you and your baby girl." "What's her name?" Jasmine looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. Throughout her pregnancy, Deshawn had refused to discuss names, saying it was bad luck. Now, holding her daughter close, only one name felt right. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope." Pat smiled, the first genuine warmth Jasmine had felt in hours. "That's a perfect name. A strong name." Dr. Thompson began her examination while Rosa sat in the corner chair, refusing to leave until she knew both mother and baby were safe. "Jasmine, I need to ask you some questions," Dr. Thompson said as she checked Jasmine's vital signs. "Can you tell me exactly what happened tonight?" The words came slowly, painfully. Jasmine told them about the contractions, the drive that went nowhere, Deshawn's cold words as he forced her from the car. "He said I should die on the road," Jasmine finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he never wanted the baby." Dr. Thompson and Pat exchanged glances. This wasn't just medical neglect. This was abandonment that could have been fatal. "Jasmine, honey," Pat said gently, "we need to call the police. What your husband did, that's attempted murder." "No." Jasmine's arms tightened around Hope. "I just want to forget. I want to take my baby and go home." "Go home where?" Rosa asked quietly. "Baby, if he left you on the road to die, what makes you think it's safe to go back to him?" The question hung in the air as Dr. Martinez, the pediatrician, arrived to examine Hope. The baby was perfect. Healthy weight, strong heartbeat, no signs of distress from the traumatic delivery. "She's beautiful," Dr. Martinez told Jasmine. "Strong just like her mama." But as the medical team worked, Detective Carl Brooks appeared in the doorway. He was a tall black man with kind eyes and graying temples, wearing a rumpled suit that suggested he'd been called in from home. "Miss Turner?" "I'm Detective Brooks. Mrs. Williams called us about what happened tonight." "I don't want to press charges," Jasmine said immediately. "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't just about pressing charges. What happened to you tonight was a crime. Your husband endangered your life and your baby's life. If Mrs. Williams hadn't found you..." He let the sentence hang. Rosa stood up, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. "Detective, I've been driving that road for 15 years. Ain't no houses for miles. No traffic after midnight. If I hadn't worked late tonight, if I hadn't taken that exact route..." She shook her head. "That man left her to die. Plain and simple." "Mrs. Turner, I understand you're scared," Detective Brooks continued. "But we have a duty to investigate. And I'm guessing this isn't the first time your husband has hurt you." Jasmine's silence was answer enough. "I need to take photos of your injuries," the detective said gently. "And we'll need a full statement. But first, let's make sure you and your baby are safe." Pat squeezed Jasmine's hand. "Honey, you don't have to decide everything tonight. Right now, let's focus on getting you both healthy and strong." Dr. Thompson finished her examination and pulled Pat aside. "She needs to stay at least overnight for observation. The delivery was traumatic, and she's showing signs of exhaustion and dehydration. But physically, she's going to be fine." "What about emotionally?" Pat asked. "That kind of betrayal. That's going to take time to heal," Dr. Thompson admitted. "But she's got something to fight for now." She looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. "That's a powerful motivation." As the night shift settled into routine, Rosa finally stood to leave. She approached Jasmine's bedside and took the young woman's hand. "Baby, I want you to have my phone number. You call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. Food, a place to stay, someone to talk to. You understand?" Jasmine nodded, tears flowing freely. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me? You don't even know me." Rosa smiled, her weathered face gentle. "Honey, I got 3 daughters and 7 grandchildren. I know what it's like to be a mother. And no mother should go through what you went through tonight. Not ever." She pressed a piece of paper with her number into Jasmine's palm. "You're not alone anymore, you hear me? That baby girl needs you strong and we're going to help you get there." As Rosa left, Jasmine looked down at Hope, who was stirring in her arms. The baby's eyes opened, dark and alert, taking in this new world she'd entered under such terrible circumstances. "It's going to be different for you," Jasmine whispered to her daughter. "I promise you, baby girl. You're going to know what love looks like. Real love." Outside in the hallway, Detective Brooks spoke quietly with Dr. Thompson and Pat. "I'm going to find Deshaun Turner tonight," he said. "And when I do, he's going to answer for what he did. But first he had to make sure Jasmine and Hope were protected. Because men who could abandon their wives in labor were capable of anything." Detective Carl Brooks had been working domestic violence cases for 8 years, and he thought he'd seen the worst of what people could do to each other. But driving through the pre-dawn streets of Atlanta, searching for Deshaun Turner, he felt a familiar rage building in his chest. He'd left a woman in labor on the side of the road. His own wife. His own child. Carl's radio crackled as he pulled into the parking lot of the apartment complex where the Turners lived. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. Subject's vehicle has been located at the Blue Moon Lounge on Peachtree." "Copy that. I'm en route." Carl made a U-turn, his jaw clenched tight. Of course Deshaun was at a bar. While his wife nearly died giving birth alone, he was out drinking. The Blue Moon was the kind of dive bar that stayed open until 4 a.m., catering to people who had nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. Carl spotted the Honda immediately, the same beat-up car that had carried Jasmine toward what should have been her death. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and desperation. Carl's badge got him quick cooperation from the bartender, who pointed toward a corner booth where Deshaun sat with a bottle of whiskey and a woman who clearly wasn't his wife. "Deshaun Turner?" Carl approached the table, his hand resting on his holster. Deshaun looked up with bloodshot eyes, his words slurred. "Who's asking?" "Atlanta police. I need you to come with me." "For what?" Deshaun tried to stand but swayed dangerously. "I ain't done nothing wrong. You left your pregnant wife on Highway 49 tonight. She gave birth on the side of the road." The woman at the table gasped and scooted away from Deshaun like he was infected. Other patrons began to stare, conversations dying as they caught fragments of what was happening. "So?" Deshaun shrugged, trying to project indifference. "She wanted the baby so bad she could figure it out herself." Carl had arrested hundreds of suspects, but something about Deshaun's casual cruelty made him want to forget his training and his oath. Instead he pulled out his handcuffs. "Deshaun Turner, you're under arrest for abandonment and reckless endangerment." "Endangerment of what?" Deshaun laughed bitterly as Carl cuffed him. "That baby ain't even mine probably. Jasmine been running around." "The baby you're talking about is your daughter," Carl interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "And if Mrs. Williams hadn't found your wife, they both would be dead right now. Because of what you did." For the first time, something flickered in Deshaun's eyes. Not remorse. Carl had seen enough criminals to recognize that, but maybe the beginning of understanding about what he'd done. "I want a lawyer," Deshaun mumbled as Carl led him outside. "You're going to need one." Back at the hospital, Jasmine dozed fitfully while Hope slept in the bassinet beside her bed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Deshaun's face in the car, cold and empty of love. Every sound in the hallway made her jump, terrified he might come back. Pat checked on them every hour, bringing warm blankets and words of encouragement. During her 4 a.m. rounds, she found Jasmine awake, staring at Hope with a mixture of love and fear. "Can't sleep?" Pat asked gently. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that road." Jasmine's voice was hoarse. "What if he comes here? What if he tries to take her?" "Honey, there's a security guard outside your door." Detective Brooks made sure of that. Pat sat in the chair beside the bed. "And I got some news. They arrested him about an hour ago." Jasmine's body sagged with relief, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you heal," Pat said firmly. "You recover from what happened and you figure out your next steps. One day at a time." "I don't have anywhere to go." The words came out as a whisper. "The apartment is in his name. I don't have family here. I don't even have a car." Pat was quiet for a moment, then reached into her pocket for her phone. "What's Rosa's number?" "The lady who helped you." "Why?" "Because I got a feeling she wasn't just being polite when she said to call if you needed anything." Rosa Williams answered on the second ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "Rosa? It's Pat Johnson from Mercy General. I'm with Jasmine." "Yes, she's fine. The baby too. But Rosa, she needs help." She's got nowhere to go when we discharge her tomorrow. Jasmine could hear Rosa's voice through the phone, strong and sure. You tell that baby she's coming home with me until she gets on her feet, Rosa said. I got a spare room and plenty of love to go around. Pat smiled as she hung up. Looks like you and Hope just got yourselves a guardian angel. I can't impose on her like that, Jasmine protested. She's done enough. Honey, let me tell you something about Rosa Williams, Pat said. She delivered half the babies in this hospital over 40 years. She's seen more new mothers than anyone, and she knows what you need right now. It ain't charity, it's family. As the sun began to rise over Atlanta, painting the hospital room in golden light, Jasmine looked down at Hope and felt something she hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for what had happened, that nightmare would haunt her forever. But for the people who had appeared in her darkest hour. Rosa with her skilled hands and endless compassion. Dr. Thompson and Pat with their medical expertise and gentle care. Detective Brooks with his determination to see justice done. And most of all, for Hope herself. This tiny girl who had fought her way into the world against impossible odds, who had given Jasmine a reason to keep fighting when everything else fell apart. We're going to be okay, Jasmine whispered to her daughter. I don't know how yet, but we're going to be okay. Hope stirred in her sleep, her tiny hand curling around Jasmine's finger with surprising strength. She was going to be a fighter just like her mama. Rosa Williams' house sat on a tree-lined street in East Point, a modest 3-bedroom ranch that had been home to her family for 30 years. The front porch was decorated with potted plants and a swing where she'd rocked her own children to sleep decades ago. When Jasmine stepped out of Pat's car, carrying Hope in a car seat donated by the hospital staff, she felt overwhelmed by the simple kindness of it all. The house wasn't fancy, but it radiated warmth and love. Welcome home, baby, Rosa said, opening the front door wide. I got everything ready for you and that precious girl. The spare bedroom had been transformed into a nursery. A crib stood in the corner. Rosa's own grandson had used it just 2 years ago, along with a changing table, a rocking chair, and shelves lined with baby supplies. Rosa, I can't, Jasmine began, but the older woman held up her hand. You can and you will. That baby needs a safe place to grow, and you need time to heal and figure out your next steps. This is what neighbors do for each other. Pat helped them get settled, showing Jasmine how to use the breast pump the hospital had sent home and explaining Hope's feeding schedule. Before she left, she pulled Jasmine aside. I want you to know, what you went through, what you survived, it's going to take time to process. Don't try to be strong all the time. Let Rosa help you. Let us help you. That first week passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes, doctor's appointments and visits from Detective Brooks with updates on Deshawn's case. The evidence was overwhelming. Security cameras from the bar showing him drinking while Jasmine was in labor, GPS data from his phone tracking his route that night, Rosa's testimony about finding Jasmine abandoned on the roadside. He's been charged with reckless endangerment, abandonment, and domestic violence, Detective Brooks explained during one of his visits. His lawyer's pushing for a plea deal, but the DA wants to take this to trial. I don't know if I can testify, Jasmine admitted. Stand up in court and tell everyone what happened. You don't have to decide that today, Detective Brooks said gently. But Jasmine, what happened to you, it can't just be swept under the rug. Other women need to see that there are consequences for this kind of cruelty. Rosa, who had been quietly listening while folding baby clothes, spoke up. Baby, you got time to think about all that. Right now, focus on getting stronger. The strength came slowly. Some days, Jasmine felt capable of taking on the world. Other days, she barely had the energy to get out of bed. But Hope was growing stronger every day, her cries more lusty, her grip more firm, her eyes more alert to the world around her. 3 weeks after the delivery, Jasmine was sitting on Rosa's front porch, feeding Hope in the morning sunshine when a car pulled up. A young black woman got out, carrying a toddler on her hip. Mrs. Rosa, the woman called out. I'm Tanya Davis. From the support group. Rosa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Tanya. Come on up here, honey. Tanya climbed the porch steps, her little boy clinging shyly to her side. She was maybe 26, with natural hair and tired eyes that Jasmine recognized immediately. This is Jasmine, Rosa said. The one I told you about. The hospital, Tanya said quietly, settling into a wicker chair. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize, Jasmine said, studying this woman who seemed to understand something about her situation. My ex-husband tried to kill me last year, Tanya said matter-of-factly, letting her son down to play in Rosa's front yard. Beat me unconscious and left me for dead. If my neighbor hadn't called 911. The words hung in the air between them, a recognition of shared trauma and survival. How do you? Jasmine struggled to find the words. How do you move on from something like that? One day at a time, Tanya said. And with help. Rosa's been like a second mother to me. And there's a support group, women who've been through similar things. It helps to talk to people who understand. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Jasmine admitted. Nobody ever is, Tanya said with a sad smile. But when you are, we'll be there. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Tanya's son chase butterflies in Rosa's garden while Hope slept peacefully in Jasmine's arms. For the first time since that horrible night, Jasmine felt like maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. That evening, as Rosa prepared dinner, Jasmine found herself opening up about her marriage for the first time. It wasn't always bad, she said, rocking Hope in the kitchen while Rosa stirred a pot of greens. When we first met, Deshawn was different. Sweet. Protective. Made me feel special. When did it change? Rosa asked without turning around. Slowly. So slowly I didn't notice at first. Jasmine's voice grew quiet. Little comments about my appearance, my friends, my job. Then he didn't want me working. Said a wife should be home. Then he started pushing me, just little shoves when he was angry. I kept thinking it would get better. And when you got pregnant? He was furious. Said I did it on purpose to trap him. Started calling me names, saying horrible things about the baby. Jasmine looked down at Hope's peaceful face. I thought when she was born, when he saw her, he'd change. That he'd love her like I do. Rosa turned from the stove, her eyes full of understanding and pain. Baby, some people got love in them and some people got poison. Ain't nothing you could have done to change what's in his heart. I feel so stupid, Jasmine whispered. For staying so long. For believing his promises. You ain't stupid. You're human. And you survived. That's what matters now. Later that night, after Hope's last feeding, Jasmine sat in the rocking chair looking out at Rosa's quiet neighborhood. Street lamps cast gentle pools of light, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of children playing. This was what peace felt like, she realized. This was what safety looked like. For the first time in years, she began to imagine a future that didn't include fear. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of justice, all marble columns and soaring ceilings that should have inspired confidence. Instead, Jasmine felt small and exposed as she walked through the metal detectors, Hope sleeping in her carrier. It had been 6 weeks since that night on the highway, and Deshawn's preliminary hearing was scheduled for this morning. Detective Brooks had explained that she didn't have to testify today. This was just to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. But she wanted to be there. She needed to see him face the consequences of what he'd done. Rosa sat beside her in the gallery, solid and reassuring in her Sunday best. Pat had taken the morning off work to be there too, along with Tanya and 2 other women from the support group Jasmine had finally started attending. When Deshawn was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. But when his eyes found hers across the courtroom, she saw the same cold emptiness that had terrified her that night. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Jennifer Martinez, laid out the case methodically. The security footage from the bar. The GPS evidence. Rosa's testimony about finding Jasmine. The medical records documenting her condition. Your Honor, Ms. Martinez said, the defendant didn't just abandon his wife in a moment of panic. He drove her to a remote location specifically chosen for its isolation, forced her from the vehicle while she was in active labor, and left her to die. If not for the heroic actions of Rosa Williams, we would be prosecuting a double homicide today. Deshawn's public defender, a tired-looking man with a coffee stain on his tie, tried to paint a picture of a young man overwhelmed by impending fatherhood. Your Honor, my client was clearly not thinking rationally. This was a moment of panic, not premeditated attempted murder. Judge Helen Carter, a dignified black woman in her 50s, listened to both sides with a neutral expression. When it came time to rule, her voice was crisp and clear. I've been on this bench for 20 years, and I have never seen a more clear-cut case of reckless endangerment and abandonment. The defendant will be held for trial, bail denied. As Deshawn was led away, he turned once more to look at Jasmine. This time, instead of looking away in fear, she met his gaze steadily. She was not the same woman he had left on that road. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger. Outside the courthouse, the group gathered on the steps. Hope was awake now, looking around with bright, curious eyes at the bustling city around her. How do you feel? Tanya asked. Jasmine considered the question. Like I can breathe again, she said finally. For the first time in months I can breathe. Detective Brooks approached, looking satisfied. Ms. Martinez wants to meet with you next week to discuss your testimony for the trial. But there's no pressure, we have enough evidence to convict without it. I want to testify, Jasmine said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Other women need to hear this story. They need to know they can survive. Rosa beamed with pride. That's my girl. As they walked to Rosa's car, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the power of her own voice. She had a story to tell and maybe, just maybe, it could help someone else. The support group met every Thursday evening in the basement of Mount Olive Baptist Church. The circle of folding chairs looked humble, but Jasmine had come to think of it as sacred space, a place where women could speak truths that the outside world wasn't ready to hear. Tonight was different. Tonight she was going to tell her full story for the first time. Reverend Grace Mitchell, who facilitated the group, smiled warmly as the women settled into their usual spots. Grace was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen everything but still held hope. Ladies, we have Jasmine with us tonight and she's ready to share. As always, what's said here stays here and we listen with love. Jasmine looked around the circle. 8 women ranging in age from 19 to 62, all survivors of different forms of domestic violence. Tanya gave her an encouraging nod. I never thought I'd be sitting in a room like this, Jasmine began, her voice shaky. I always thought domestic violence happened to other people. Weaker people. Women who should have known better. Several heads nodded in understanding. I met Deshaun when I was 25. He was charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted in a husband. The red flags were there from the beginning, but I told myself they were signs of how much he cared. She told them about the gradual erosion of her independence, the isolation from friends and family, the escalating verbal and physical abuse. But when she got to that night, the contractions, the dark road, the moment he told her to die, her voice broke. I keep thinking about that moment when his taillights disappeared, she whispered. I had never felt so alone in my entire life. And then I felt hope dropping and I realized I wasn't alone. I was about to become somebody's mother, and that baby needed me to survive. Rosa, who was sitting in the outer ring of chairs for family members, wiped tears from her eyes. The thing that haunts me most, Jasmine continued, is that I stayed with him for 3 years. I made excuses for him. I believed him when he said he was sorry, that he'd change. I thought if I loved him enough, if I was perfect enough, he'd become the man I married. That's what they want us to think, said Maria, a 38-year-old woman whose ex-husband had broken her ribs. That it's our fault. That we can fix them. But we can't, added Keisha, the youngest member of the group. We can only save ourselves. And sometimes, Jasmine said, looking down at Hope, who was sleeping in her lap, we save each other too. After the meeting, as the women filed out into the cool October evening, Reverend Grace approached Jasmine. Have you thought about speaking publicly about your experience? Your story, it's powerful. It could help a lot of people. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Jasmine said. Maybe not today, Grace agreed. But think about it. Sometimes God uses our worst experiences to help others avoid the same pain. That weekend, Jasmine had her first supervised visit with a social worker to discuss her plans for the future. She'd been living with Rosa for 2 months now, and while the arrangement was comfortable, she knew it couldn't be permanent. I want to go back to school, Jasmine told the social worker, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen. Before I got married, I was studying social work. I want to finish my degree. That's an excellent goal, Dr. Chen said, making notes. There are programs that can help with childcare and financial assistance for single mothers. What made you choose social work? Jasmine looked at Hope, who was playing with a soft toy on the blanket beside them. I want to help families. I want to make sure other children don't grow up in violent homes like I did. Like you did. Dr. Chen looked up from her notes. For the first time, Jasmine talked about her own childhood. The father who drank too much and hit too often, the mother who made excuses and told her to keep family secrets. She talked about how normal Deshaun's behavior had seemed at first because it was all she'd ever known. I don't want that for Hope, Jasmine said firmly. I want her to know what healthy love looks like. I want her to be strong enough to walk away from anyone who tries to diminish her. It sounds like she already has a strong role model, Dr. Chen said with a smile. 2 weeks later, Jasmine received a call from the prosecutor's office. The trial date had been set for December 15th, just 2 days before Hope's 3-month birthday. Are you sure you want to testify? Ms. Martinez asked during their prep meeting. It's going to be difficult. The defense attorney will try to make you seem like you're exaggerating or that you somehow provoked what happened. I'm sure, Jasmine said. I need to tell my story. Not just for me but for every woman who thinks she deserves to be treated like that. Ms. Martinez nodded approvingly. Your testimony is going to be the heart of this case. The jury needs to understand that what happened to you wasn't just a domestic dispute, it was attempted murder. As Jasmine left the courthouse that day, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was going to stand up in front of a room full of strangers and tell the most painful story of her life. But she was ready. Hope had given her a reason to be brave, and Rosa had given her the support she needed to find her voice. Now it was time to use it. The courtroom was packed on the morning of December 15th. Local news stations had picked up the story, "Woman left in labor on roadside seeks justice," and the case had struck a nerve in the community. Jasmine sat at the prosecutor's table, wearing a navy blue dress that Rosa had helped her pick out, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the racing of her heart. Hope was in the gallery with Rosa, Pat, and what seemed like half the congregation of Mount Olive Baptist Church. Reverend Grace had organized them to come show support, filling 3 full rows behind Jasmine. Deshawn sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. He'd lost weight in jail, and his cocky swagger had been replaced by nervous energy. The state calls Jasmine Turner, Ms. Martinez announced. Walking to the witness stand felt like the longest journey of Jasmine's life. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, but when she sat down and looked out at the gallery, she saw Rosa's encouraging smile and felt her courage solidify. Ms. Martinez began with gentle questions about Jasmine's background, her marriage, the gradual escalation of abuse. Then they came to that night. Mrs. Turner, can you tell the jury what happened on the evening of October 3rd? Jasmine took a breath and began. Her voice was steady as she described the contractions, the car ride that went nowhere, Deshawn's cold dismissal of her pleas. He told me to get out of the car, she said, her eyes fixed on the jury. I was in active labor. I could feel the baby coming. I begged him not to leave me there. What did he say to you at that moment? He said I should have thought about that before I trapped him. He said he never wanted kids, never wanted to be tied down to someone like me. Jasmine's voice caught slightly on the last words. And then? He drove away. He left me alone on a dark road in the middle of labor, and he told me to die there. Several jurors visibly reacted, one woman covering her mouth in shock. When the defense attorney cross-examined her, he tried every trick in the book. He suggested she was exaggerating. He implied she had provoked Deshawn somehow. He even had the audacity to question whether the baby was really his. But Jasmine was ready for all of it. The months of therapy, the support group, the love and encouragement from Rosa and her community, they had prepared her for this moment. Sir, she said calmly when he suggested she was being dramatic, I gave birth on the side of a highway. There were no pain medications, no doctors, no sterile equipment. I could have died. My baby could have died. There is nothing dramatic about stating that fact. When he implied she had somehow asked for what happened, her voice turned to steel. I was his wife. I was carrying his child. I asked him to take me to the hospital. There is no world in which that justifies abandonment. The defense attorney sat down, clearly frustrated. Rosa took the stand next, describing in vivid detail the scene she'd found on Highway 49. Her 40 years of nursing experience gave weight to her testimony about how close Jasmine had come to death. I delivered babies for 4 decades, Rosa told the jury. I seen complications, emergencies, every kind of situation you can imagine. But I never seen a woman have to give birth alone on the side of the road because her own husband left her there to die. Dr. Thompson testified about Jasmine's condition when she arrived at the hospital. Detective Brooks walked the jury through the evidence. The GPS data, the security footage, the timeline that proved Deshawn had been drinking at a bar while his wife was fighting for her life. When the prosecution rested, the defense's case lasted exactly 47 minutes. Deshawn's lawyer called a few character witnesses who painted him as a confused young man who'd made a terrible mistake. They didn't put Deshawn on the stand, too risky given his history of saying exactly the wrong thing. During closing arguments, Ms. Martinez spoke directly to the jury's sense of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about the most basic human obligation, protecting those we claim to love. Deshawn Turner didn't just fail in that obligation. He actively endangered his wife and child. He drove her to an isolated location and abandoned her in the most vulnerable moment of her life. The defense attorney made one last attempt to minimize Deschamps' actions, calling it a moment of poor judgment rather than attempted murder. But when Ms. Martinez stood for her rebuttal, her voice rang with moral authority. Poor judgment is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. Poor judgment is being late for an appointment. Driving your wife in active labor to a deserted highway and leaving her to die is attempted murder. Don't let the defendant's lawyer convince you otherwise. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned with their verdict, the foreman stood and looked directly at Deschamps. On the charge of reckless endangerment in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of abandonment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of domestic violence in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Jasmine closed her eyes and felt 3 months of tension leave her body. Behind her, she heard Rosa whisper, "Thank you, Jesus." Judge Carter scheduled sentencing for the following week, but she addressed Deschamps directly before court adjourned. "Mr. Turner, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such callous disregard for human life. You will serve every day of whatever sentence I impose." As the courtroom emptied, Jasmine found herself surrounded by her support system. Rosa, Pat, Tanya, Reverend Grace, and so many others who had carried her through the darkest period of her life. "How do you feel?" Detective Brooks asked. Jasmine looked across the room at Deschamps, who was being led away in handcuffs. For the first time in years, when she looked at him, she felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no love, just nothing. "Free," she said simply. "I feel free." 6 months after the trial, Jasmine stood in the doorway of her new apartment, holding Hope on her hip while Rosa fussed with the curtains in the living room. "These windows get beautiful morning light," Rosa said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Hope's going to love playing in that sunshine." The apartment was small, just a one-bedroom in a safe complex near the university, but it was theirs. Jasmine had found it with help from a non-profit that assisted domestic violence survivors, and she'd furnished it piece by piece with donations from her church community and her own slowly growing savings. "I still can't believe I'm really doing this," Jasmine said, looking at the acceptance letter from Georgia State University that was framed on her kitchen counter. She'd been accepted into their social work program with a full scholarship and additional support for childcare. "Believe it, baby," Rosa said firmly. "You earned every bit of this." Hope babbled happily and reached for Rosa, who took her with the easy grace of an experienced grandmother. At 8 months old, Hope was a bright, curious baby who smiled at everyone she met. She had no memory of that terrible night she was born, and Jasmine was determined to fill her daughter's life with so much love and security that she'd never need to know fear. The doorbell rang and Jasmine opened it to find Tanya standing there with her son Michael, now 3 years old, and a woman Jasmine didn't recognize. "Hey girl," Tanya said, giving Jasmine a hug. "This is Carmen. She just left her husband last week, and she needs somewhere safe to stay tonight." Carmen was young, maybe 22, with a black eye that makeup couldn't quite hide and a duffel bag that probably contained everything she owned. She looked terrified and ashamed, the way Jasmine remembered feeling in those first days after her own escape. "Hi Carmen," Jasmine said gently. "Come in. Let me make some coffee." As they sat around Jasmine's small dining table, Carmen told her story in halting whispers. It was different from Jasmine's in the details but heartbreakingly similar in its arc. Love that turned to control, control that turned to violence, violence that finally became unbearable. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't have money, I don't have anywhere to go. My family thinks I should go back to him." "Your family's wrong," Jasmine said firmly. "You did the hardest thing, you left. And you're not alone." She gave Carmen the number for Rosa's house, the address of the support group, information about the shelter downtown. But more importantly, she gave her something that no pamphlet could provide, the evidence that survival was possible. "6 months ago, I was where you are now," Jasmine told her. "Scared, broke, convinced my life was over. Look at me now. I have my own place, I'm starting school next month, and my daughter is healthy and safe. You can have that too." After Tanya and Carmen left, Jasmine sat on her couch with Hope, who was getting sleepy in her arms. The apartment was quiet except for the sounds of normal life, traffic outside, a neighbor's television, children playing in the courtyard. Her phone rang. It was Ms. Martinez, the prosecutor. "Jasmine, I have news about Deschamps' appeal." Jasmine's stomach tightened. Deschamps had been sentenced to 8 years in prison, but his lawyer had filed an appeal claiming ineffective counsel. The appellate court rejected it, Ms. Martinez continued. "The conviction stands. He'll serve his full sentence." "Good," Jasmine said and meant it. Not because she wanted revenge, but because other women would be safer with him behind bars. There's something else, Ms. Martinez said. I've been talking to some colleagues about your case. Have you ever considered law school? You have a natural ability to communicate complex emotional situations clearly. You'd make an excellent attorney. Jasmine had never considered law school, but the idea sparked something in her. I'm starting my undergraduate degree in social work next month. Keep it in mind for the future, Ms. Martinez said. The legal system needs more advocates like you, people who understand what survivors go through. After she hung up, Jasmine sat thinking about the conversation. Law school. She'd never imagined herself as an attorney, but she could picture it now, standing in courtrooms fighting for women like Carmen, like herself, like all the survivors who needed someone to believe their stories and fight for their safety. Hope fell asleep in her arms, and Jasmine carried her to the crib in the corner of the bedroom. She stood watching her daughter sleep, this beautiful little girl who had changed everything just by existing. I'm going to make the world safer for you, Jasmine whispered. For you and for all the little girls who come after you. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: school, parenting, building a career, continuing to heal from trauma that would probably echo through her life for years to come. But tonight, in her own apartment with her healthy daughter sleeping peacefully, Jasmine felt something she'd once thought she'd never experience again. Hope. Not just her daughter's name, but the actual feeling. Hope for the future, hope for healing, hope for a life built on love instead of fear. She was 29 years old, a single mother, a survivor, a student, and soon to be a social worker. Maybe someday a lawyer. Maybe someday someone who could change the system from the inside. The possibilities felt endless. 5 years later, Jasmine Turner Williams stood at the podium of the Atlanta Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 500 social workers, attorneys, and advocates. Hope, now 5 years old, sat in the front row between Rosa and Pat, wearing a purple dress and swinging her legs happily. 5 years ago, Jasmine began, her voice strong and clear, I gave birth to my daughter on the side of Highway 49 after my husband abandoned me there to die. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Tonight, I want to talk about what happened after that moment, not just to me but to my community and hopefully to all of you. Jasmine had graduated summa cum laude with her BSW, then immediately entered law school on a full scholarship. She was now in her second year, working part-time at a legal aid clinic that specialized in domestic violence cases. But more than that, she'd become a voice for change. The story she told that night wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. She talked about Rosa, whose simple act of stopping on a dark road had saved 2 lives and sparked a movement. Rosa now ran a non-profit organization providing emergency housing for domestic violence survivors, funded by donations from people who'd heard Jasmine's story. She talked about the support group that had grown from 8 women meeting in a church basement to a network of 12 groups across the metro area, serving hundreds of survivors annually. She talked about Detective Brooks, who had pushed for stronger domestic violence laws in Georgia, legislation that was now being considered by the state legislature. She talked about Dr. Thompson and Pat, who had developed a hospital protocol for identifying and helping domestic violence victims during medical emergencies. But most importantly, Jasmine said, I want to talk about the children, because they're the real reason we do this work. She gestured toward Hope, who waved enthusiastically at the audience. My daughter has never known fear as a normal part of life. She's never seen a man hit a woman. She's never heard anyone tell her she's worthless or trapped or less than she is. She's growing up believing that she deserves respect, kindness, and love, not as gifts she has to earn but as basic human rights. The audience erupted in applause. But Hope isn't unique. In the past 5 years, our network has helped over 300 women leave abusive relationships. That means over 400 children are growing up in homes where love doesn't come with violence, where conflict is resolved with words instead of fists, where they can sleep safely at night. Jasmine paused, letting the statistics sink in. Those children will grow up to choose partners differently than we did. They'll break cycles of violence that might have continued for generations. And someday some of them might stand at podiums like this one, telling their own stories of transformation. After the speech, as the audience filed out and the awards ceremony concluded, Jasmine had been honored as Georgia's Advocate of the Year. She found herself surrounded by survivors wanting to share their stories, law students interested in domestic violence work, and politicians promising support for the legislative initiatives she described. But the moment that meant the most came when a young woman approached hesitantly, carrying a baby who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. "Miss Turner Williams? My name is Sarah Chin. I left my husband 3 months ago. I heard your story on the radio and it gave me the courage to call the hotline." Jasmine looked at this young mother and saw herself 5 years earlier, scared, uncertain, but determined to protect her child. "How are you doing now?" Jasmine asked. "Better. I'm in a transitional housing program, and I start nursing school in the fall. I have a long way to go, but—" Sarah looked down at her baby, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "But I know we're going to be okay." "You are," Jasmine said with certainty. "And when you're ready, when your story has had time to heal into wisdom, maybe you'll help the next woman who needs to hear that survival is possible." As the evening wound down, Rosa approached with Hope, who was getting tired but trying to stay awake for all the excitement. "Mama, are we going home now?" Hope asked, climbing into Jasmine's arms. "We are, baby girl. Was I really born on the road?" It was a question Hope had started asking recently, old enough now to understand that her birth story was different from other children's. "You were," Jasmine said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "But you know what? That road led us to Rosa, and Rosa led us to this whole family we have now. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the best things because they teach us how strong we really are. Like in the fairy tales? Better than the fairy tales, baby. Because this story is real." As they drove home through the Atlanta streets, Hope fell asleep in her car seat, and Rosa dozed in the passenger seat. Jasmine drove through neighborhoods she knew well now, past the hospital where Hope was born, past the courthouse where Deshaun was convicted, past the church where she'd found her voice in that first support group meeting. Tomorrow she had classes, a court appearance for a client, and a meeting with legislators about the domestic violence bill. Next month, she'd graduate from law school and start her job at the DA's office, focusing on prosecution of domestic violence cases. But tonight, driving through the city that had become home in ways she'd never expected, with her daughter and her chosen mother sleeping peacefully beside her, Jasmine felt the deep satisfaction of a life rebuilt on her own terms. She thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, broken, abandoned, terrified. That woman had given birth in the darkness, alone and desperate. But she'd also fought. She'd survived. And in surviving, she'd discovered that she was capable of things she'd never imagined. Love without fear, strength without hardness, hope without naivety. Most importantly, she'd learned that the end of one story could become the beginning of something even better. As they pulled into the driveway of the house she now owned, a modest 3-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with good schools, Hope stirred in her sleep. "We home, Mama?" "We're home, baby girl. We're home." And for the first time in her adult life, Jasmine knew exactly what that word meant.